Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the Calpha Solar 5 kilowatt inverter. It's a 48 volt inverter. It can take in 5,500 watts of solar, and it has a 500 volt VOC limit. So not bad really. I mean, I think it's a range of 120, which is pretty common, to 450, and then that extra 50 volts is for some headroom there. So first I'm going to take a look at the rack battery they sent me. They sent me a 48 volt, 100 amp hour rack battery to go with this. It actually came with a kit. So it sent some wiring with it. And so they sent the battery, this, and some wiring. So I'll look at the battery and then I'll show you guys the installation here when I hung this on the wall. All right, so looking at the front of the battery, there's two positive, two negative connections. They work with Amphenol connectors. If you're not familiar with these, they are a quick disconnect, essentially, that you can release with that button there. Pretty nice. They're just not very mainstream yet. I've seen them on the EG4 Pro batteries, and some of the others, like Ruxu has them on theirs now also. But yeah, you can't find many of the connectors online. You can find them, but just that they're not typical like a lug here. So you can find them on Amazon. Like there's one or two links there, and I know Signature Solar carries them also. But they're really nice. So then, oh, and I guess I should go over what came with the kit. Mostly odds and ends. Like there's some stickers here for numbering them, I guess, so you can, if you have a bunch in parallel. I think you can put 19 of these in parallel. They gave a grounding wire with the pack here also. And there's some zip ties and just some standard stuff that nobody's going to care about. There's, I guess that makes it not standard, but there's a parallel cable, which is going to come with most rack batteries. And then there's a kit, it looks like, to pin your own cable if you need to. But you're going to need a longer wire to get to your inverter. All they send is that 1 foot piece here, so I'm going to make it work here for testing. I just made a lug on this side because it comes with a double Amphenol connector. So then here is a 125 amp breaker. This is your state of charge and alarms. That's pretty standard if you guys have looked at any other rack batteries. Your pins, your dip switches, I mean. RS-232, RS-45, and CAN for communication to the inverter. So it's just over 5 inches tall. And if we don't count the wings on the side there, it is just right at 17.25 wide and 15.75 deep. All right, so decent wire management here. They have laser welded bus bars. Looks like Eve sells also when you check it, when you scan the barcode. And the wire management is decent. You know, if you see a LL model, EG4 LL model, the inside of them, maybe I could put a photo up here. If you see the way that they wire things and how nice it looks inside, that's pretty much the standard to judge others by. But yeah, I mean, they did a decent job with the leads here. I'm going to take the front off and see if I can figure out what BMS this is in just a second. Yeah, so this is the main negative. I mentioned I saw another review on this. Brad did a review on this. And this main negative crosses over the main positive. And I have to agree with him. He was mentioning this in his video. There's actually a little crease here in the negative from laying on top of the positive terminal. And that, I was hoping maybe in this battery and mine it would be different. But yeah, that's a bad idea there. They need a different, whether they need to run this in a separate tubing or figure out a different way across that, because that's a bad idea. As this ages, it could wear through, and that's your main positive and main negative bar there. Bad idea. The EG4s have a small pre-charge resistor box right here, and it's wired into the BMS. This one does not have that. As a matter of fact, I focused in here. I could focus in here in a minute, or you could just trust me. It says this is a Westwoods here, so I need to see if I can look it up. All right, so you can just make out the green charger light blinking down below here. And I have the EG4 18 amp charger here. You can see it's charging. So I'll check the low temperature protection here. Man, that's frustrating. I did get it to do it one time off camera, and then I set my camera up for a better view and cannot get the low temperature protection to click on again. So before it had an alarm light right here. So that's my fault for trying to adjust things to get a better view, but it did work once, but I cannot get it to do it again. I might have to get a can of compressed air or something, so for just cases like this, so I can test things. So this has 4 temperature sensors, and based off what I saw before, they do work, but I'll tell you what, it's a pain in the butt trying to get it to activate. All right, so this all came in a kit. To do the discharge on the battery, I'm just going to go ahead and use the inverter they sent me also. This is a 5 kilowatt, 48 volt inverter. And this is what came in the inverter box. The manual, from what I can tell, it covers like 3 or 4 different types of inverters. It's rough around the edges. I read through it, or attempted to read through it. It's rough around the edges. It needs some fine tuning to be able to understand everything they're talking about in there. And then there's some lugs and some other little nuts and bolts and screws. So when this came in the kit, what else comes with it? They send a separate box with some PV wire. This is for the AC side. So they sent, it's a 7 gauge wire. So this is for the output. From what I gathered from reading there. Some more PV wire. And then there's some shorter strands of PV, which it looks like it's supposed to come from the disconnect there. They've got a ferrule on it already, or this may go straight. They may send this little whip here probably to hook into the inverter itself. So I'll see what the terminals look like. I'll get this on the wall, and then I'll show you a mounting bracket, which I think is actually really cool, that they sent to mount the rack battery on the wall. All right, so with the shroud off, you can see, or the cover off, you can see here AC in and out. And they've got little terminals here that you have to use a ferrule when you put them in here, and then tighten them down with a flathead screwdriver. And same thing over here for the PV. And I put that photo on the screen of the stats, but I didn't realize this goes up to 450 volts open circuit. That's pretty impressive. This is a interesting little unit. And as far as I can tell, it cannot be paralleled. So if you need 120, that's it. So I don't believe you can combine 2 of these to get a 240 volt output like we're used to with some of the other units. So, and this is actually looking at it from underneath the unit. They do have some dry contacts here and some different communications ports. But if you look down here, parallel connections. This is for paralleling inverters, or where it would be, and there's blanks there. So yeah, these units are basically standalone. So this is 5,000 watts of 120 volt, and that's it. So I think I may hook up, I'm going to have to go get a receptacle, but I think I may hook up their 7 gauge wire they sent with it. And these ferrules will fit in the output. I'm sorry, I bumped the camera there. These ferrules will fit in the output terminals here. I went ahead and used one of the lugs that they included with the kit, and it looks like a 1/4 inch. Here's another one here, but it looks like a 1/4 inch bolt. So what is that? M6? Anyway, they send that with the kit, so it bolts into, for the battery cables there, it bolts in right there. I'll focus in a little further so you guys can see. I do prefer this over the inputs on the EG4 3000. I don't like just something where you jam the cables in and tighten it down. I prefer to have a lug. All right, so this is what I thought was pretty neat. I'll put a picture on the screen of what it's supposed to look like, but essentially this shelf sits on the wall. The server rack will sit, where the server rack bottom will sit right there. And then they've got brackets that bolt into the sides. Shouldn't be too complicated. They send anchors with it too, and then some real beefy wood screws. And it mounts it to the wall right there. So wherever I think it would be a good idea for Signature Solar and Current Connected to start carrying these. I don't know how well they would adapt to different server rack batteries. I'm sure they have theirs designed for it. I think there's some bolts on the side. But I think it's a neat idea for really small systems, or even for RVs or something like that, to be able to mount a server rack battery right to the wall. There's no directions with this thing, but I don't think anyone's going to need it. So far, it's pretty easy. These guys are a little soft, though, these wood screws. So if anyone's going to be getting this kit, just be careful as you put them in. But yeah, so far, so good. Yeah, so I looked all through the mounting kit, and I could not find, like, these plates here. I believe they're supposed to go something like that. I would prefer that, but it's just shy of working like that. But yeah, I found these bolts in the battery pack, and I think that's what they're for, in the pack for the battery. So I'm going to see how this works here in just a minute. Yeah, just a really neat idea. So I mentioned before about a mobile setting, though, for this. I don't know. I guess you could still put some rubber pads and stuff in between it. But this holds it really firm. I was wondering why they made the brackets this way instead of winged out, but there's no reason to have them outwards like that. It would kind of block. If you wanted to do 2 or more here, it would block that. So this actually is pretty common. All right, so here's one of those situations that isn't ideal, but it'll work. This is the smart shunt I'm going to be using to monitor the battery capacity. And I have a longer negative than I do a positive. And I like to get them pretty balanced to keep everything kind of in line. But this is going to have probably 2 feet longer on the negative, maybe 1.5 feet. I haven't measured it. I just don't want to cut this. I've got this for another kit, so it'll work. And this is, again, this is coming off the negative battery lead right to here and then going straight to the inverter. And this will, if you guys haven't used a shunt yet, the Victron smart shunts are fantastic. All right, so it is on. I think setting 8 it was. I switched to lead acid, and it's ready to go. I've just got to wire it up now on the output so that I can show what this thing can do as far as outputting. All right, so I've got the inverter on. I looked up error 58. It wasn't doing that originally when I turned it on. It's probably something to do with the lead acid setting that I put it on. I'd need to look through there. It's not affecting the output. Doesn't seem to be, so I'm going to go ahead and check the output now. We'll stress test it a little bit here. I've got it hooked to, I'll show you here in a second. I got the output coming to this adapter, and then I'm going to hook to the charge inverter here. And yeah, after I get this charge inverter hooked up, I'll set the amperage. This is a single phase inverter, so 120 volt inverter. And I have a 30 amp outlet, so that's going to kind of be determining how far I can push this up to. But the charge inverter is a great way to test the capabilities of something, especially a smaller inverter. It's a great resistive load test. And I saw recently Adam DeLay had a video where he was testing a power station with it. And I chatted with him a little bit, and I built 2 of the adapters like he did. So I have a 30 amp 120, and I have a 20 amp, so I can plug it into a standard wall outlet also now that I got the adapters. So yeah, I'm going to get that hooked up here in just a second. And it's going to be charging these 3 EG4LL models here. So that's what I'm going to have the charge inverter hooked up to. I have one side here, the other side there, hooked straight to the bus bar of this smaller cabinet, this 3-slip. All right, so I've set it for a 45 amp charge. That's DC output. So let's throw the breaker here. All right, so we are outputting 3,000 watts, just over 3,000 watts so far. Fan's still pretty quiet. All right, so I upped it to 50 amps DC charging. Each battery is getting roughly 16.5 amps into it right now. Just a smidge more, I think, on the other one. 23 amp output on the unit so far. All right, so I have it set to 60 amps from the charge inverter. So we'll see what the output is on the inverter. All right, so we're just over 3,500 watts that we're running right now, and I think we're maxed out on the outlet I have. So we're 29 amp output AC, and I think you can go up, see how much the battery is outputting. 83 amps is coming from the battery right now. So that is 83 amps coming out of the battery. The rack battery is 100 amp charge and discharge. So I can almost max it out. I just need something else to fully max it out. I am really surprised by how quiet this is. I can hear the charge inverter behind me more than I can hear this. Yeah, so we're holding steady at 3,500 watts, something like that. I would have to wire this little guy to a load center to completely max him out. And I don't think I'm going to do that over here on this side of the shop. But I am going to test the battery here, the battery capacity here in just a minute, and I'm going to hook the PV up also. We'll test those. And it does recommend ferrules. So we'll crimp these on. Positive on the left, negative on the right. And it looks like a really small flathead. I had to go searching for a smaller one. All right, there we go. So it's fired up. We got a little over 1,000 watts of solar coming in right now. And again, sorry about that error code. I'm going to work on that, see if I can email them and see what's up. So I got this beautiful little heater going and a heat lamp. You can see the glow of it there, the red light. And that gets me, and I'll put a photo up on the screen, it gets me right over 20 amps. And I want to be somewhere right in that window to check the capacity of the battery. So I finished my discharge test, and I think it was 103 amp hours. I can post the picture. Normally I have a different picture of it, but the battery was actually in hibernation mode there, so I just pulled it out of the Victron history. I almost forgot to mention, I emailed Calpha Solar and they sent me a battery communication cable, and so the comms are working on the battery. Everything works as it should. And the reason that error 58 was blinking before, if you were going to use lead acid, I switched to lead acid mode, but also there is another setting here where you change it from BMS or whatever that is to lead acid. So that's on setting 32. It didn't mention that in the manual. So anyway, if you are using just voltage, like a user type of style, that's what you would set it on. And that error 58 goes away. So this is what I normally have in front of the test wall that I have for the inverters, the new one I made. These guys, because there's a window right over there. So this, I put them both on dollies with wheels so I can just move them out of the way when I film something. But this is an orange, and we got our first oranges this year off of him. And then hopefully this year I'll get some lemons. This is a lemon one here. And there's some buds on it already. So at the very least, we'll have a lot of flowers. We'll see. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this video up, guys. I just wanted to give some final thoughts on the inverter and battery. Yeah, so as far as the battery is concerned, I think they need to change some of the wiring. Like I said, the main negative for sure, that's a concern. And when I started the inverter up here, initially the first time I used a resistor because I didn't see a pre-charge resistor in there or anything in the manual about it. Since then I emailed them and they did say that they have it in there, so they may be using a different method. But I did start it up without that to test it. I didn't have any issues. So they say the rack battery does have that in there. If you're going to get this and get the kit, then make sure to purchase the longer cables. So I think they sent me a set of 5-foot or something cables. But yeah, you're going to need something longer than what comes with the battery. So my thoughts on the inverter itself. The manual, like I mentioned, they need to add some stuff in there because some of the settings were not even in the manual as far as how to get the rack battery to communicate. A couple of the settings weren't even listed in there. They did send this wireless dongle here to hook to the inverter. So I got it to hook up somewhat, but I can't get it to communicate, so I might do that in a follow-up video. I've also, like I said, I need to put a little load center somewhere here, a little breaker box, so that I can pull the full amount from this inverter, and then I could hopefully show this connected at that point also in another video. So I'd say it's grown on me. You know, when I saw that you couldn't parallel them, I guess that eliminates some use cases for people. But it depends on what you're going to do with it. It's extremely small. Like, this is a very small unit for being able to output 5 kilowatts. As a matter of fact, here, I hope that's all the way in the screen, but this is the EG4 3000 watt inverter. They are similar in height, but the width is larger actually on the 3000 watt inverter here. And I did mention before that I do like the wall mount for the rack battery, and I believe it's universal. I think it would probably work with Life Power and some other batteries also because of the way they ovaled the slots to be able to bolt into the racks there. So I think you could probably have multiple different styles of rack batteries sit in that. So in a mobile setting, this may work, and it's pretty similar to a lot of the others as far as 120 volts being the starting voltage. So with some smaller RVs and stuff like that, that's a bit of a challenge to get up to that 120. So a lot of people use Victron because you can have a much lower starting voltage. But people use those EG4 units in mobile settings as well. So that's about it on this one, guys. I will put a link in the description below to the package that I got here, as well as just that bracket to hang rack batteries also. I'm sure there's more I can add on this one, so like I said, if I can get to a follow-up video, I'll put more stuff in that one. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned.